Brace the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more to reach the professionals who are more likely to find your ad relevant. Plus, with 1 billion members on LinkedIn, that means you'll have access to 130 million decision makers and 10 million C-level executives. That's a lot of millions of the right people. Get started today and see how you can reach the right buyers with LinkedIn's enhanced targeting tools. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Robbie Samuels hosts the On the Schmooze podcast. Robbie, tell listeners what to expect from the show.
Since 2015, I've interviewed entrepreneurs who overcame challenges to achieve success in their field or industry. Tune in to On the Schmooze to listen as I ask deep questions to elicit untold stories about leadership and networking.
And where can people subscribe?
Find the show at ontheschmooze.com or on marketingpodcast.net, or just search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard them. Go subscribe.
Welcome back to The Trending Communicator. I'm your host, Dan Nestle. One of the things I love about having my own show and complete editorial discretion is that I make the rules. I mean, I don't really have many rules, but if I wanted to, I could. But what I do have is guiding principles. Love my listeners. Conversation over structure. Focus on the future of communications and marketing. Connect the dots in real time, assuming my brain is working properly. Be the real me, take it or leave it. And finally, invite exceptional guests, leaders in our field who I admire, respect, and want to hang out with. It works for me, and I'm assuming since you're listening, works for you too. But thinking about today's guest, I found myself reflecting on how and why I landed with this particular set of principles. You have to go back, way back to the early days of social media, content marketing, digital, all that stuff. I'm talking decades. Well before LinkedIn reached its first 1 million members, when it was invite only, I somehow managed to wrangle an invite from somewhere, and I forget who, and my apologies if you know who you are. But I was invited to the platform, and what I saw shaped everything that would follow. Authors, famous bloggers, or at least famous to me, people who are changing the discipline of marketing in real time were having conversations right there in front of me, and I felt like I won the golden ticket. But on the other hand, I felt like I was totally out of place and didn't belong there. Didn't matter. That was imposter syndrome. I've coped with that my whole life. But regardless, these people understood that digital media changed everything. Brands could connect with their customers directly. Individuals could wield more influence than ever before. Audience behavior, media consumption, brand interactions could all be measured in unprecedented ways. And now here we are, a generation later, and you can replace digital media with AI and say exactly the same thing. We're in another era of disintermediation, individual empowerment, democratization, misinformation, disinformation. It goes on and on. But this time around, we're already digitally connected in uncountable ways. We're digitized, interdependent, and yet we're really hyper-fractured. And to help figure out what all of that means to us, our profession, our audiences, and the media, I'm turning to one of those very people who are on LinkedIn at the dawn of time, defining and shaping digital communications. He's a dynamic media analyst, innovation catalyst, and communication strategist with decades of experience in anticipating trends and shaping actionable insights that help organizations stay ahead in an evolving media landscape. He's provided strategic counsel to hundreds of global corporations and nonprofits, earning consistently high marks from client CEOs, CCOs, CMOs, and as well as his colleagues. He's racked up awards and accolades, including PR Week 40 Under 40 a while back, Forbes Web Celeb 25, and was named one of the most influential bloggers in the world by Technorati, to those of you who remember that. chances are you've read his work in Ad Age, Forbes, or on any number of social media channels, or you've seen him speak at one of his countless appearances, or perhaps you worked with him at or through Edelman, where until recently, he focused on media insights and strategy and spearheaded the firm's foray into AI and all things new. Please welcome to the show my friend, and maybe my first social media crush, the legend, Steve Rubel.
Oh my God. Is it my funeral?
Well, it's funny. I have you ever read the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People?
I have. That was an amazing book. I should probably read it a second time.
I read that 20 something years ago. I don't, I can't even tell you. And early in my corporate days, even before I was in comms, like probably I was in HR recruitment at the time. And everybody was so hyped up about this book. You got to read the 7 Habits, the secret to success. But I don't remember all that much of it. I remember something about quadrants. And I remember sharpening the saw, where, and where you're thinking about improvement. And anyway, like I think the book even starts with this whole idea of imagining your funeral and your, like what would be said about you, what would be the obituary. And I know it's very, very dark and terrible thing and sort of, a little morose, but whenever I have a like great guests, and I always have great guests, I don't think in terms of obituary, but I do think in terms of, what would I want to say about them, about their incredible lives and how does that fit into what I'm doing? And I guess it does come off a little eulogy-esque. Steve, I'm sorry, man.
It's just super nice. And so, anyone who knows me knows that I don't get hung up on that kind of stuff. And I mean, and a lot of that honestly was years ago, just, because I had a public profile significant in the industry, from roughly 2004 or 5 through 19 or so. And then really kind of went dark deliberately.
Yeah.
To kind of focus on different things, and now I've been now that I'm out and on what I call hiatus, in between opportunities. I'm getting back out there again, hence being on your show.
Yeah,
so, but thank you. I mean, I'm flattered that anybody remembers me.
Oh, are you kidding me? I mean, look, it's the world, or I think the social media OGs and, the people who are like very enthusiastic about especially communications and technology and the future of what we do. And the big thinkers in the room, they must be thrilled that you're kind of a free agent right now and are out there talking.
It's great to get out there. I mean, this has been, I don't like the circumstances could have been better, but for all involved, but I would just say that, just being out there I've just had a great, few months just talking to people like yourself and catching up and meeting with different leaders in the PR community and to a degree in the marketing community, and just learning and just, taking some time to go to some conferences and to hear what's going on, as I explore what's next.
Well, we're going to want to hear a lot about that. Certainly your thoughts about what's going on and especially when it comes to AI, of course, but I've been on and on for months at least, but certainly for a long time about my not so hidden feelings about media relations and the whole, let's call it the discipline of media relations as we know it, which is not to besmirch the idea that media relations is important. So let's put that out up front. But I've been talking about that a lot, and what you've been doing with AI and with measuring, or with analyzing media plays into that in a big way. And we'll get into that. I just wanted to just address this whole thing about, you haven't gone dark and now you're back a little bit. And it's like, forgive me. Like, I think most people went dark during the pandemic time, and I started before that.
Yeah. I kind of made an intentional decision around, I don't remember the exact year, 2018, 19, 17. Yeah. So there were a few things. One is I So I was blogging in the beginning for sure, heavily, and I mean, look, that wonderfully helped me find Edelman and helped Edelman find me. So
it was micro persuasion, right? That was
the name of the weblog. Yep, and I wrote that from roughly 2004 through 2009ish, 10. I forget exactly when I kind of gave it up, and that helped me. It helped me establish a name for myself, and it got Richard Edelman's attention, and he got my attention, and that was just a wonderful collaboration and opportunity, and that led to 19 years in one place.
It's amazing.
So that was just that wouldn't have happened without any of that. So, but by the time I got to late part of last decade, I think I was a little tired of just. I think I'd run out of things to say, to be honest, at that time, and I saw the platforms changing dramatically also. And I just saw that Twitter was not, which it was still Twitter then, it was not what it was 5 years before. It was the people who were polarizing, controversial, thought-provoking, yes, but more so. And noisy were the ones who were continuing to build influence and grow and be relevant. And that's not me. Thought-provoking I can do, but controversial, no, that's not me. And also at the time, I'm working in a big organization with 6,000 people and, Lord knows how many clients. And it just, it wasn't anything that happened. It just was like, I saw that it had diminishing returns. And then also, I think the nature of my role also was changing too, where it had diminishing returns. And so I said, okay, you know what? I think if I stop doing this, at least in this format, and I want to start to do what's next in my career here. And so I really turned my attention to, really kind of doing client work and figuring out how I could do that more so than I was doing before.
Sure.
And then after that, the pandemic hit, and that changed a lot. And so at that point, but I just saw it was during the first Trump administration, no matter which side you were on, it was such a noisy environment politically. And I had no interest in being part of that discourse.
Yeah.
So just not me, So I really said, okay, you know what? I think that this chapter has closed. And look, those years away, now that I'm kind of back and I'm doing it more, although I really should be doing it more intentionally than I'm doing it now, and I'm doing it on LinkedIn, and that changed a lot. I mean, that platform has gone through tremendous changes, positive. And, I see that, that I still got it, I guess. And,
of course you do.
I don't take any of this for granted. I mean, it's, 6-7 years, whatever it was, is a long time.
Yeah.
New people come along, new formats are along, people retire, and and so I never took it for granted, but it's still there, and I see that when I do something relevant, it can work. Well, and actually, when I left, I just was blown away by the response, people reaching out to me. My phone didn't stop ringing for 3 weeks. Dan, I didn't expect that. I'll be honest, I really expected nothing.
Well, it speaks to what I said at the upfront, that you're just humble and kind to people, and you always have been. But it's also, I think part of that is, if you went dark for 4 or 5 years and you're sort of withdrew a little bit, it's like jumping back in. You're not seeing the incremental changes. You're not keeping those incremental fires going, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a much bigger shock to the system. It's like you swim in cold water, you come out, you dry off and go back in, and you're shocked again. But if you're just like, keep swimming, that the water's just as cold.
And I have no goal here other than to just learn, and to explore what's next.
And you've always been like that person exploring what's next, and I get the sense that you've always been a lifelong learner as well as a teacher, in your own way. There's a lot that's coming next, or maybe we're in next right now. It's hard to tell. It's crazy.
This is the most transformative time I've seen. And I say that with each shift, but this one's really bigger than anything I've seen.
And you've seen it. I mean, you were part of that first one. Well, it's not the first one, but it's the first one of ours.
I was part of. Yeah. I certainly was, starting my career when the internet was just getting going.
Yeah.
Commercially.
Yeah. I was at the same time. I mean, I started my career around the same time. I just went more traditional routes, and not like sometimes I just want to smack my head into the wall because I'm like, oh, I wish I was blogging in 2002. I mean, it's the kind of thing where you can look back and say the things that you should have been doing. Like, oh, I should have started my podcast in 2007 when there was nothing. But that's like people, and it's easy to say that to hindsight. But in your case, though, it's funny. I did follow you. I had known of you since 2003 at least. I mean, or maybe at the earliest. Like that's when, because we were comparing notes like last time we chatted, where we both joined LinkedIn like within months of one another, because you could find that information on LinkedIn if you look. So, back in the dawn of time, like I said, so sort of self-deprecating there as well. But I was an eager and avid follower of what Steve Rubel is going to say next. And then when I joined Edelman 10 years later, I remember I was already in my 40s or early 40s, whatever. And I was just like, okay, I finally made it to Edelman after a winding career. And I'm supposed to be this digital guy and have my finger on the pulse for my clients and so on, working with great people. And then my boss, David Rosen, wonderful man, says to me, hey, let's go up and see Rubel. I want to talk to him about something. I'm like, wait, what? Who? He's like, yeah, let's go talk to Rubel. I'm like, Steve Rubel? Yeah, he's here. He's upstairs. We can talk. And I was floored that you could just walk in and talk to Steve Rubel. I had never met you. So, walk into your office.
No airs whatsoever.
Nothing.
I just don't. I don't do that. Yeah.
Oh no, not at all.
Not any criticism those who do. I mean, that works for them.
But that's all that's all on me. My point is like I'm like sitting here like gushing and I'm like, oh, he's a dude. He's a regular guy. I respect and admire the hell out of everything he's done.
Thank you.
But just a guy like me, and it was awesome. I'd see you on the elevator every now and then. It was fine.
Yeah.
Not like running into Richard or something where I'm like petrified and standing in the corner. But with you, it was perfectly fun.
Those rides in the elevator with Richard are fun.
Oh my goodness. But anyway, getting to this whole idea of this is the most transformational time that you've ever seen. And that's a bold statement. I agree, but it is a bold statement. Well, let's get into that. I mean, what do you think and we can start bandying around the AI stuff, but how do you think this time is different? What is specifically, what is it specifically about, with relation to comms and marketing, especially? What is it that is more transformational this time, and what's got your eye?
Well, I think it is AI, and but it's AI coupled with dramatic social, political, and geopolitical changes, and I think that's environmental, and so which had been brewing for many years now, and so it's that mixed together that really is, I think, without making any kind of political statement of any kind, but it's that together, I think, that really is going to be, one is that comms people are going to be, are dealing with incredible disruption, change, instability, whatever you want to call it, through those kind of societal and geopolitical environmental shifts. And then now you have AI just coming in and just totally, positively and negatively impacting the profession, and quickly.
Oh, it's the speed is.
I mean,
outrageous.
Social media. I remember, back, when I first started writing about it in 2004, it really, and I was saying how transformational it was. It really didn't start to hit and be truly transformational until about 5-6 years later, until it reached I think when Facebook got to be 1 billion users or something like that, that's about when it was really like, okay, but I remember going into corporations and they didn't want to go on social media. They were afraid of it. They didn't want to, or legally they couldn't do it. And they were just concerned, about, they were in regulated industries and they couldn't be out there. By the time you got to the beginning of the last decade or so, or the middle part of the last decade, that was gone.
Yeah.
It was just, it had worked its way around. So this is different. This is AI is coming way too fast and too furious. And there's going to be the people that are leaning into it, quote unquote, the right way versus the ones who are not. It's going to separate those folks fast.
That's exactly, well, you said it differently, but that's exactly what I said, yeah.
And I would argue that every technological change to date, at least for the ones I've been alive for, has been a net positive for communications professionals. So what do I mean by that? Well, go back to the 90s. And when you look at the internet and email at that time, and then a little bit later, web search, how that made the job of communications professionals easier, faster, and better. We were able to engage journalists much more easily. We were able to, stand up websites for content, and reach audiences directly, even before social. Then think about social media and what a huge driver of business that was to agencies. Whether it be standalone social media agencies, look at Gary Vaynerchuk, right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, humongous business he built off that. Or just, divisions, social media divisions of places like Edelman, or of, on the advertising side. So it was a value creator. It was not erosive. Or minimally erosive.
I mean, we did hear a lot of fears during those years, of course. Like, even when I was at Edelman, it was still in the kind of, let's call it the early adoption or the sort of begrudgingly growing adoption of social media and digital content, marketing approaches, et cetera, by regulated industries, especially. Like some of the other industries had already gotten ahead a little bit, but we're still in the early days in 2014 or 2015.
Yeah. So it took a little while.
And I remember, one of the wins that we had at Edelman, we were claiming, and maybe it was true, but we were claiming that we were the very first quote unquote social media agency of record for the financial industry. A lot of qualifiers in that phrase, but it's true.
Yeah, I mean,
but I think it's true.
I don't remember exactly, but I mean that would make sense. And so that took time, but it was a value creator. It didn't take away jobs. It created jobs. It didn't really siphon off revenue. It created new revenue streams because these companies they needed help to stand all this stuff up. They didn't necessarily have the expertise, or they had some expertise and they needed additional expertise and strategic, counsel from agencies that were working on this for, dozens or if not hundreds of clients. And so it was a value creator in many ways. AI could be a value creator, but it also has equal power, if not more power, to be a value destructor. And so, let's take an example of that.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, where that may happen is that may happen at both ends of the experience spectrum. And what I mean by that is it may happen to young people who are entering the profession, and it may also happen to veterans in the profession. So let's look at both ends of that.
Sure.
On the junior side of things. So, I've been very impressed with the deep research tools.
Oh, yeah.
I've been using the one for ChatGPT, and I think Google's is really coming along strong in the last few weeks with what they've been doing. And I now don't go into a meeting without. Oh, I went into this meeting. I should have done that, but I've gone into because I know you. But I don't go into a meeting, and I've been meeting with people who I don't know, without running one of those things, and at times also carefully checking it to make sure I don't put something out into a meeting that's a hallucination, which would be worse than putting it in the meeting in the first place.
Well, let me just tell you, if you would have done it for me, and then if we didn't know each other, and you ran a deep research thing on Dan Nestle and tried to figure out who I was, you'd come into this discussion and you'd start asking me about the book on quantum mechanics or quantum computing that I've written, and my certificate from MIT, and a couple of other things I've authored and speeches I've given, which of course never happened.
Well, it depends on how you do that. I would probably ask about the Dan Nestle who worked for Mitsubishi or something like that.
Well, the thing is, right?
Frame it.
And I've done this now a few times, and I think that it's all based on how much information is out there about the subject of your
100%,
search, right? So
it's only as good as right. Yeah.
It's a little humbling to see that there's not enough out there. There's so little out there about me that this machine has to fill in the blanks with some really fantastical things.
I think it's the prompt too. But anyway, but my point is that
for
that if a junior person is creating a briefing book for an executive to prepare them for an interview, or to prepare a brief on an issue, to help a new business team in an agency start to prepare for a pitch. That's taking that work, which would be whatever, a day and a half, depending on what has to be created, 2 days, 3 days, max, of somebody's time who is 1, 2, 3, 4 years out of school, and taking that down to 5 minutes with 2 prompts and a button click.
Yep.
And then a read through and a check. And some light editing. So that's a value. So you can look at that 2 ways. It's a value creator because wow, we have this thing and it's super insightful. There's probably no mistakes, but it's a value destructor because that person's role now. What is that junior person going to do?
Yeah.
Now let's look at the other side of the pendulum. In that people with a lot of experience are highly paid and valued because they have a lot of experience. They've worked on a lot of things. They have a lot of knowledge, or I should better say wisdom, that for good reasons makes them highly valued. Well, if corporations now or people have that information at their fingertips and an expert on any topic at all, that they can ask questions of and engage in real time as they make decisions and as they, practice things, does wisdom also become devalued? So is there a deflationary environment for people with experience and wisdom in knowledge industries and not for amongst knowledge workers? So it's also, now, it could be a value enhancer as well because it can take those people and, it can take their work from a 5 or a 6 to a 7 or an 8 or 9 or whatever it is. So it could build on that too. And so I think so maybe it's a little less destructive at the senior level than people might think. But again, it's also potentially the psychology of it is that to people who are staffing or whatever, or, they may not need as many people.
Yeah.
And so at both ends and in the middle, obviously, there too, because they straddle that. And so I think that in communications, it could be a for the agencies a revenue driver.
Yeah. For
the corporations, improve the quality. The in-house teams improve the quality, the efficiency, and the efficacy of what they do. But at the same time, it can be a highly erosive environment or deflationary environment as well.
Yeah.
And if people can't charge for what they used to and so forth, or it takes them, much less time. And I don't think that social never did that. Social never was a value destructor in the sense of, the way I just described it.
Yeah.
It's not. It was always more work to be done, requiring more skills, requiring more monitoring, requiring more technology, and it was more for and with no end in sight. This is not the same thing.
Just thinking about social and the way that evolved and the empowerment of individual creators and individual writers and people had a point of view to basically get their point of view known and distributed far further than they ever had before. That was how it started, really. Certainly that's additive. That's a value add for those people. But for journalists and for media, I think that was incredibly destructive for that industry.
Yeah, although it was edited there too, and that they had to do all that,
right?
But it was disruptive in that sense, in that there were people who were yes, it was disruptive. Yeah. One, because it siphoned off audiences away. It was disruptive because it
it killed print.
That was because of traffic flows and what that did to, and so forth, and how they had to evolve their model.
That's right.
But they've gone through many, many different ways of that, right? Mm-hmm. Going back to the dawn of the internet has been So it's been a disruptive force and an additive force there too. But in comms, it wasn't that way. It was always those things, the internet, social later on, search to a degree, was all additional work to be done.
Yeah.
With more people. And the industry grew like mad in revenues and number of people. If you look at the Bureau of Labor statistics and all that, it just grew like, graduate education programs. When I went to school, there was no comms major. There was a comms major. There was no PR major at the time. Now, there's programs all over the place.
Yeah.
So this is, AI is, and I think that unfortunately, every organization is grappling with it from what I've seen.
For sure.
And no one's got all the answers. And no individual has all the answers, despite what people may say. Mm-hmm. But, I think that the tricky part is that everyone's going to have to figure out themselves how to embrace and use these tools, even in very complex settings.
Yeah.
Now, I think they'll have help from that. I saw that that once people got access to enterprise sanctioned tools, it changed everything. And I think that we forget that there was a period from roughly, November of 22 when ChatGPT launched to sometime in 23 or 24 when Copilot started to really, for Microsoft Office shops or, Google really didn't get going with that.
They were a little
last
late.
year. Or ChatGPT Enterprise or, Claude Enterprise or, whatever it is. A lot of that stuff, didn't really come in until
very recently,
early to mid to late 24. And people didn't want to do that because they just were afraid that, the stuff was going to be, reused and there were people who, had got in trouble for it and so forth. There was, so I think, online and, it has been written up. So I think that now that at least in medium and large size companies, I think that's kind of now.
Yeah.
Now they have tools and people feel more empowered, but it's still, training is great, enablement is great, but I saw that when you really got to sit down team by team by team.
Yes.
And say, what do you do? What's your workflow?
Yes.
What would Tim Ferriss, a friend of mine, always says on his show, what would this be like if it was easy or had no friction or something like it? Like he says, and to ask yourself that question. And I think that's very scary for people because you're telling them to find an easier way to do something using these tools, which, to them says, you're asking me to find a way to make myself less relevant.
And we've been conditioned for however long we've been alive that hard work is good work. If you're looking for the easy way to do something, it has a stigma to it. So there's this whole psychology around this. There's also this idea, I think, that the vast majority of people, aren't thinking about how they're going to move up the value chain. They're just thinking about doing their job. And many of them are just happy doing what they're told. Many of them feel like, and that's fine.
They're not super motivated right. And nothing wrong with that. That's
nothing wrong with that. But now you're telling these people that, oh yeah, by the way, it's up to you to figure out how to expand your universe here and move up the value chain. Or, the phrase that you hear all the time, and I'm certainly guilty of using, is AI is like one of the great things about AI is it's going to free you up to do something, right? It's going to free you up to focus on more important things. If you're a first-year employee, you don't even know what those important things are. If you are a senior level person and you're kind of set in your ways in a lot of ways, you're like, geez, I thought I was already doing a lot. What am I going to free myself up to do next? Write a book? Do a podcast? I don't know. So there's
but great leaders with great leadership.
Yeah.
That's where this comes in.
Yeah.
Because that can be augmented through AI.
Yeah.
And the emotional side of that is not going to be replicated by AI.
For sure.
I mean, it can be deceptive that it appears to do that. Mm-hmm. But because at times it does seem so alive. Yeah. But it's not going to understand human behavior and human, and psychology the way that, especially at a granular level, understanding what your team's psychology is, what your team's culture is like, what your corporate culture is like.
Yeah.
And so I think it's going to make great leadership more and more important to inspire people in what's possible, to surround people by others who can show them what's possible, who are not afraid, to encourage experimentation, to encourage innovation. There will be, the billable hour model is going to be disrupted.
Very much.
Although I did see, there was some legal conference, I think last week, and I think that the head of LexisNexis or something like that was saying that lawyers are going to be able to charge even more than they, good ones. Or, I don't know how they're going to do that, but there's models in other professional, PRs, you look at marketing, look at accounting, look at management consulting, look at legal to see what's working there and bring that over.
Yeah.
And so I think it's going to be great leadership and empowerment. It's going to be really important because you're going to make your people feel that they can do this.
And to some degree, I agree. And of course, but to some degree, I should say, and to some degree, the nature of the way of work is changing. It's definitely going to change. And we don't even, in some senses or in many senses, we don't even know what the new job description is going to look like. This whole idea of creating value or changing the role, especially for entry level folks, is like you're going to free them up to do things that they're not doing before. Well, somebody's going to figure out what those things are. And we have a little bit of abundance happening here, I think, if you're looking at it from a certain direction. Go on, Steve.
Yeah, but so last week I was in Austin, Texas for the association, as we're recording this last week, for the Association of National Advertisers AI conference. Mm-hmm. And so the ANA, for those who aren't familiar with it, they're the largest trade association representing the corporate side marketers. So, the Procters and Gambles, the Johnson and Johnsons of the world, they are members of this organization. And their charter is to advance what advertising and marketing professionals, client side, do. Mm-hmm. And I heard Rashad Tabakawala speak, and then I also had breakfast with Rashad, who I know for a long time. So for background here for your listeners, Rashad Tabakawala spent about almost 40 years at Publicis. Rising, basically, I forget the exact where he was in the hierarchy, but like second or third in command, within that organization with an innovation focus for years. And he started his career at, I forgot the agency that they owned, the ad agency. So he was, he basically had a 40-year career there. And then he left full-time there about 6 years ago. And he's still a consultant, still an advisor, but now he speaks and he writes and he invests and he's got a foundation and so forth. He wrote an amazing book called Rethinking Work. And if I'm getting the title wrong, just read his name.
I'll throw it in the notes properly.
Yeah, but he really talks. And when I met with him, because I've been just getting a lot of great advice from people. He said to me that really now in an AI age, that people more and more are going to have to focus on becoming a company of one.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that they go out on their own. That means they have to view themselves as how they're going to invest in their skill set on their own, probably, even within the four walls of a large corporation, whether it's, on the agency side, the client side, marketing, advertising, PR, wherever it is, to really up-level their skills quickly and to experiment. Another speaker was at the event was Shelley Palmer, who does a lot of speaking and writing about this, and he told everybody in the room that if you're not spending, $20 a month at least on one of the frontier tools and you're using only the free one, you're missing out. You should be in, and he said to everybody in the room, and it was all senior marketers.
Yeah.
So he was right to say this. You can all afford it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so maybe a junior person can't afford, to spend $20 a month on ChatGPT, plus. Understood. So I think they may have to find some workarounds to different things, or maybe they do the bundle with, Gemini and the other stuff they offer. So, but it's, but I think it's going to be on everybody to figure this out themselves, but they're going to have spiritual guidance and tools in many cases and guardrails to follow from their employers. And if those don't exist, they actually could push for that and help lead and drive that. It will be a, extracurricular activity probably.
Yeah.
But I'm seeing that, that everyone from agencies, corporations, nonprofits, I tell everybody, nobody has more than 2 years of experience doing this. Yes, there are people out there like our former colleague, Gary Grossman from Edelman, who have been writing and thinking about AI for over a decade. And
very few people like that.
On comms.
Yeah.
There are a few people out there that are like Gary. But for the overwhelming majority of everyone else, November 22 is when we all started to use this stuff at the earliest.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell college kids, you got 2 years on us.
Mm-hmm.
You're coming in and if you've been using this in your studies, no matter how you've been using it, you're going to have 2 years of experience that you should be packaging yourself that way because we don't have that, because a lot of us waited to get the enterprise tools for good reason. And that didn't really happen at scale until, 23 and 24.
Yeah.
So you may have a lead on us. So I think it's going to be, everyone is going to have to really grab this, themselves and say, how do I use this? It's going to destroy some of the value I create here. I don't care what level you're at. It's going to happen. It's not going to destroy all of it, but it's going to destroy some of it. And so you have to figure out, how do I stay ahead of it so that I turn this into a value acceleration and creation system for me and takes my work from a 4 or a 5 or a 6 to a 7 or an 8 or a 9.
Yeah.
And for me to be able to create new value where I work, and that's going to be uncomfortable for a lot of people.
Yeah. I think something you just said.
I can tell you how I did it also. I can tell you how I did that, on my end.
Yeah. And before you do that, something you said really one word really hit me, which is system, right? system thinking and kind of more like broader types of thinking in terms of models and frameworks and thinking in terms of critical thinking as a baseline is not something that comes natural to most folks. And if you're going to create value with AI be that one person value creator, you have to think about how to turn yourself into a system, how to create. Sometimes people say ecosystems or ecospheres or whatever, but that you have to think about all the tasks that nobody's going to have the time or the money to teach you to do anymore. And what can I learn quickly and attach to my own system that is going to add value to whether it's my own thing or to my employer, which means that you also can't be thinking in terms of, well, my job description is this box and I'm going to stay within this box. Because, at some point, the communicator is going to be like, I don't have to walk over to the accounting team or to the finance team. In fact, you could do that. This could be happening right now, but I don't have to walk over to the finance team. I can figure out what this means. I can sort of start to vet, is this financial report I'm reading or writing, is this legit? I can get a really good head start on that and learn quickly how to make that happen with a variety of AI tools. I can automate a few things myself. I can create my own job. And until
that's what Rashad talks about as a company.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and until you get larger, till that thinking becomes more commonplace or grows at scale. I think I've talked about this before on the show. There are so many blockers to this, so many difficulties so many challenges to overcome when it comes to, pay systems and hierarchies and all that stuff.
It's, and plus, corporate culture, it's going to make it very, very hard. So you have to, if you're a young person coming into this field, you have to think about how you disrupt yourself before somebody else disrupts you.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's hard. I mean, I don't know how I would have done it at 25, 24. I mean, I know how I did it at 54, 53, but I mean, and I did it, but,
well, let's talk about that. Let's talk. You were just about saying
I did it, but
if I really interrupted you, like how did you go about doing this for yourself? And then let's work that into the kind of the inventions or the innovations that you've discovered along the way, especially when it comes to media and analysis, because I don't think one could have happened without the other.
Sure. Yeah. So I was really, for many years, my work was qualitative research. And I would, in the beginning of this, when I was hired by Edelman after the social media days, my job was to understand the changes in social media and what that was going to mean for communicators and also what that was going to mean for journalism. And so I did a lot of qualitative research. I would go out and, I remember we had early meetings with Jack Dorsey and Biz Stone and Evan Williams when they had just started Twitter. And, we got in early to places because Edelman was, a powerhouse and is a powerhouse. And so, I did all this kind of, later on I would go and meet with media CEOs or innovators on the journalism side or academics to hear kind of what was next in journalism or content marketing and so forth. So I was in that kind of role. When the pandemic hit, and then I would go and, go talk to as many clients and engage as many clients as I could and help to keep Edelman ahead and help to keep the clients ahead. And then also, to some degree, speak in the industry for a long, be visible in the industry. That was the model. And then by the time we got to, roughly 2020, I think that it was time for me to start to do something different, as I mentioned. And lockdowns hit. And so I wasn't going anywhere anymore. I wasn't going to see clients in person, and they had a lot to worry about, and as we all did. And I wasn't going to, meet with media CEOs. I mean, I did some of that virtually in the beginning, but so I had to really think how to quickly reinvent my role at that time. As you know, I think I'm a huge sports fan. And I have been fascinated by how analytics have come along and revolutionized baseball, football, basketball, hockey, tennis, you name it, where teams or athletes understand the tendencies of their opponents, statistical tendencies. Offenses know what defenses are going to do. Batters are going to know what pitchers are going to do based on data and pattern recognition. And I asked myself, why don't we know the media better than they know themselves? Why don't we have pattern recognition in journalism? Because it is full of patterns. And there's got to be a data-driven way to attack that. So I went on a little spirit quest during the lockdowns. I had some time. And I started to investigate different tools and developed a way of thinking to using data to identify and quantify what those patterns are in the news environment and what that means for clients and how they communicate. And did that through a mix of tools in Excel. I did not touch Excel for the first 30 years of my career. And during the pandemic, I remember, where I sat by the pool here during the summer and I read a book on how to do all that stuff, how to manipulate the data. Where I didn't know everything by far, but I knew enough to be dangerous. And I knew more than most people in PR. So, quants and other people would laugh at me, but certainly I was doing more with Excel than non-financial people were doing. And so that was good. And that got me working with a lot of teams to advise them on media strategy in a data-driven fashion. Teams were hungry for that information because they were always looking to figure out how to stay ahead of what's going on in news. Then AI hit, and I wrote about this, on LinkedIn. And I actually didn't sign up for ChatGPT right away because I kind of didn't like it. You had to give a phone number. I was this unknown company. I mean, I didn't want to give up my cell phone number. I tried to give it my Google Voice number. It wouldn't take it. And so I didn't sign up right away. And then I got a text early in 23 one weekend from a coworker who was in church. And he said, "Hey, have you started thinking about how you bolt AI into your analytics process?" And I said, "No, why would I do that?" And because I thought it was a search thing. And I was kind of a little asleep at the wheel. But then I was like, this guy's really smart. And he understands what I do. He understands AI. He understands comms. I'd be foolish if I don't, look into this. And I remember it was like a freezing cold weekend here in New York. And so I started to play around, and I started to feed different data sets into the AI tools to see what I could get out of it.
Yeah. Just straight up experimentation, just playing around.
Total experimentation. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
And so I was like, wow, this is really good. And I immediately saw how I could take something that was a 4 or a 5 to a 6 or a 7 or an 8. And then just continue to do that for 3 years. I just refined and then trained people how to do that. Mm-hmm. And as the AI tools got better, figured out how the prompts could be better, but also figure out how the data collection that I would bring into the prompts could be better. So and the questions I could be asking, the things I could be doing. And so, by the end, I was working on hundreds of clients, and teams thoroughly knew exactly what this did. Unfortunately, the financial realities of Edelman were the financial realities of Edelman, and they had to make a decision to part with about 330 employees in December of 2024, and I was on the other end of that.
Yeah.
So after navigating three prior rounds of layoffs, so it's so I think, but honestly, I think the one reason why I was able to do that was because I did have this, I did stay ahead of this.
Yeah.
So this is incredibly powerful for anybody in comp. So nobody told me how to do this. Nobody said to me, you should do this.
Yeah.
No, I could have kept doing what I was doing, and because it was working. I didn't have to evolve it. Well, I could have just kept going. Staying still.
This goes to your earlier point about senior professionals, senior people, how they're going to be affected by job destruction or job or value creation. It's like, you can't expect a person with no experience in dealing with the issues that communicators deal with and marketers, I suppose, but to even have those dots to connect in the first place. So there to even have the incentive to create such a tool or to create that whole to figure out, I want to understand the patterns of that exist in news coverage. And I think I can do it this way, or maybe this way or this way. It takes I don't know, probably decades of understanding and wisdom to kind of get there. I mean, you might,
Well, I saw it was that in my case, it was, and there were people who did that and I trained and it did great. But I also saw that my 35 years of experience in and around newsrooms as a communicator and the clients I worked on and being part of prior evolutions, or at least being witness to prior evolutions, I think positioned me. And so it was, and again, going back to my sports analogy. So I'm going to use a baseball analogy here.
Please do.
Aaron Judge has to go up and hit a baseball being thrown at him 100 miles an hour. And he has to, if he, in a good season, hit, 1 out of every 3 of those at bats, get a hit. And ideally, hit, 50, 60 home runs a year. That is skill and talent. But he is informed by film and analytics about what pitchers do in different situations based on statistics and what teams do. Doesn't necessarily predict future, outcomes, but it's the same thing. How do we, I kept using that as a North Star model to say, how do we do that? So it's not just the data we collect, it's the insights we drive out of that. And I equip people who have that level of talent and expertise to take their work from a 4 or a 5 to a 6 or 7 or an 8. Because if we do that at scale as a team, suddenly our value goes up and we stay ahead of AI.
Yeah.
One day AI may do all this for us. It doesn't today. I saw that when teams would say, show me the 10 reporters who are writing about X, Y, or Z at scale, it would give you an answer, but it wouldn't be right. And the teams would know it. They're like, that's not right. That person's not there anymore. That person left that outlet. That person doesn't even write about that. That's made up. They knew.
Yeah.
And they got disappointed when they saw that because they were like, oh, it's not this oracle that I thought it was.
Right.
But when I showed them that when you give it information that you already have and you feed it something, it's different.
Yeah. Well, what are the kind of patterns? What are the kind of patterns that you were identifying? We do have a lot of comms people who listen in, and marketers would be I'm sure that they'd be interested to find out like some of the aha moments or discoveries that you made.
So it starts with good data. And so I would, collect I had a process for pulling, metadata on thousands of stories and around a particular topic or or out of a particular outlet or out of a group of outlets. And so, so something I would always love to do. And actually I wrote about this because I did a LinkedIn Live earlier this year with Muckrack, where I do get the data from. And I think Muckrack there's a lot more to Muckrack than meets the eye.
Yeah.
And they're a great company, and Greg Galan, who's the CEO, you should have him on your show. He's just a terrific leader. And they got
You're
a
that,
great
Greg?
culture over there.
Next time I reach out to you.
And so I would pull down a lot of unstructured data out of there. And so, for example, you could take, and I did this on the webinar I just mentioned, or LinkedIn Live, I should say. I would take vertical outlets, let's say, 4 food outlets, 5 food outlets, 6, 8, 3 HR trades, 4 marketing trades, all the PR trades, whatever it is. Wholesale index everything that they wrote over a period, 3, 6, 9 months. It's not pulling down the full text. It's pulling down the metadata.
Yeah.
So, and then finding out, for example, what are the critical issues that are being covered in this particular data set? Well, that can quantify what the critical issues are in, let's just say, higher ed or in human resources, and quantify that. Those are the jobs to be done that the media is writing about. Well, if you have a solution to those jobs to be done and those problems and those critical issues, and they're writing about those at scale, you have an entry point and a way of pitching those outlets that you didn't have before.
Yeah.
So media relations, earned media, is a highly inefficient discipline.
No.
It's highly, and it has, look, despite all of the wonders that email did to it, all of the wonders that later social media brought to it, and situational awareness and things like that weren't possible before. It's, when you read words on pages and that was it. But it's still inefficient. Look, here's where the good news is in the AI story. It's not going to devalue relationships. Relationships are going to be really important. Journalists, you take them out for coffee, you talk to them, you meet with them, you serve their needs, you read what they're saying. It can help. Yes, it can help with some of that, but those relationships, and same thing as sales, relationships. Same thing with, if you're a client leader working in an agency, client relationships, or anywhere, customer relationships. That's going to be critical. It's the human side of that that's going to be important. That's Aaron Judge hitting a baseball being thrown at him 100 miles an hour, 30% of the time.
Yeah.
But if you bring in the analytics to make that more informed, so that you really can know them a little better, and you can anticipate where things are going, and you understand what kind of critical issues they might be writing about, so that you can bring them even better story ideas. Now you're the New York Yankees or any other baseball team with a analytics department that is providing that kind of information.
It's kind of shocking in so many ways that those of us who've been trying to persuade audiences to do certain things at certain times around certain issues for our whole lives, whether you're on the marketing side or whether you're on the comm side, wherever they are in their either buyer's journey or their influence journey or whatever journey they're on. We want to get in front of people when they need us or when they're most receptive and deliver a message that resonates. To get there, the science of studying audience behavior, the sophistication of audience research. You can argue that some things haven't changed very much, but we have definitely gotten more sophisticated. Why have we never treated the media as in the same way as an audience and as a fractured audience?
We did. The people, and I don't know, would say we had, within the team I worked in, we would say we had 3 clients. Mm-hmm. We had our internal stakeholder clients, we had our client, and we had the media. And that dance was hard at times.
For sure.
Because, the clients had one set of expectations, the media has another set of expectations. That's always been going on since I entered this profession in 1991. That doesn't go away. Mm-hmm. And the internal client is in the middle of all that. So it's understanding but that can take your relationships. Mm-hmm. And it could take them from a 4 or a 5 or a 6 to a 7 or an 8 because you're giving them better stories.
Yeah.
You know them better than they know themselves. You know how to bring in how the client can fit into that because you know the client already. And you use AI to know the client even better. And so to quantify, to analyze news coverage of the industry and so forth. So suddenly that's going to make it's a superpower. Yeah. And so it could devalue some of the work that you do, but you find ways to turn that also into a value. So it's not just a value destroyer; it's a value creator, and you find what that is. Or let's take another field entirely, or another aspect. You're a graphic designer, or you're creating social media content. And look, the AI is coming in a big way into Adobe's tool set, or if you just look at what ChatGPT's been doing with the image creation stuff, and
nuts.
In the last couple of weeks, it's so how do you use that? But then, it's almost like this, Creative Commons model, which is also a dated reference here, where you take that work that you generate with AI, but then you build on top of it and you make it better. Or maybe you use that to create a library of assets that you bring together in some sort of creative way.
Yes.
And so I think that, visually, so a lot of visual artists are very concerned about this stuff because it can just, the same thing as with writing. Yeah, it'll write it for you, but it's not going to be on the mark. It's going to be a starting point. It is going to be, or it's a point where you've written it and you bring it in and you make it better. And so I think that there's, a lot of the discussions around, oh my God, it can do our work for us. But if you're constantly thinking about how to use it to grow your superpower, and again, it starts with good leadership. Your leaders have to empower you to do that. They got to give you the tools. They got to give you the guardrails. They have to give you in some cases, the time to go do this. They have to be patient with you as you figure this out. Once they find the successes, they're going to have to champion them and show people the bones of what worked for them and say, this could work for you.
Yeah.
Or you need to find inspiring people who have done this, whether they're older like me or they're young. And I think that's, when you're young, that's very, very hard to do. And because you're just, some people just don't want to speak up. They're nervous about it. Others are more, they're more, they're more outgoing and ready to do that. So I think that's going to be the tricky part, but the leadership at the top has to enable that, not just through the tools, but really through the culture.
They're going to have to really think about, they have a lot to think about. They have to think about their organizational structure. They have to think about their business model in some cases, how all this is changing it. But it's interesting that, everybody has, I think, this capability now to create that system around them, or to think much more broadly about what they can contribute, how they're going to create value, how they're going to avoid the destruction of value. And, I fundamentally come down on this glass half full side of things where, I'm on team, this is going to be good for us eventually, team. I mean, I'm not. But it's not. I think it's going to be good for us, but it's not going to be good for everybody, because not everybody has the career skills to do this. This is undeniably true. And anytime there's a technological revolution, you always have a displaced group of people, and we have to figure out how to. We haven't
seen that in communications, I don't think.
Well, not in comms.
Not yet.
Not yet, but we,
advertising, we saw it.
Yes. But, we have to be compassionate and, figure out ways to help those who are displaced in some way. And it's funny, I'm using the word displaced. I got angry with PRSA recently for using the word displaced to refer to people who had lost their jobs. But they didn't lose their jobs because of AI. They lost their jobs because of policy. I think if your job evaporates because of AI, I think it's a little bit of a different situation. But
it's going to be hard to discern what's what. But
regardless, we need to be compassionate.
Everyone's going to. And there's going to be a need for people like yourself, Dan, who are lighting the light.
Yeah,
and showing people and bringing on guests who have done this. And if you're not doing it already, maybe bring on junior people who have done this.
Oh, I'd love to.
If you could find them. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's they may not be as vocal for but.
You'll definitely find some of those people in the startup world and in the, some of the entrepreneurial types who have just decided that they could do what they need to do with AI or with whatever tools they have, and they go for it. Now they're going to run into their own mistakes, and they're certainly going to have lack some of the wisdom to reach certain clients, but they still have incredible ideas and different perspectives that we should be listening to and learning from. But if your audience takes away anything, there's going to be a leadership void. Mm-hmm.
So that's a big opportunity for a lot of people, young and old. And everyone's got to figure this out themselves within the confines and environment that they live in.
Yep.
It's important. It's doable. I did it at 50, whatever I was at the time, 53.
Yeah.
52. I'm doing it today.
I'm doing
so
it.
Rashad Tamakawala says that you should spend an hour a day learning.
Mm-hmm.
And people are like, that's hard. I got my kids, I got this, I got that, but I think those people, by the way, the AI as a learning tool is tremendous.
It's amazing.
But I think it's those people who are learning and, use it in your personal life. You feel like, oh my God, I work in a regulated industry. I can't do this. Okay. So figure out how to do it in your personal life and then start to ask questions about what you can do within your walls.
I always found that I've always been a learner and I've enjoyed learning. I have little patience to sit down and read books these days, but I've always found that AI has been, always found, it's only been a couple of years, but what I love about the experience of sitting down with it is it just indulges my curiosity and my kind of fantastical ideas. And I say, well, what if I could do this? Or what if I could try this? It doesn't have to be a PR comms thing, usually is, but what if I could do this? And then just by the process of me, maybe I should try this first, or maybe I should try this first. That is a learning exercise. I may learn that I can't do it, or I may learn that I can't do it yet. Or I may learn that my idea sucked. I don't know. There's a lot of learnings that come, but I can learn that I'll do it.
Right. There's only so many. No matter how much analytics I have and how much I'm smart about it, I'm never going to be able to hit a baseball being thrown 100 miles at me. I'm gonna be 10 feet back from that.
Oh, completely.
So I don't have that. I'm not 6'7" or whatever Aaron Judge is. It's so forth.
I don't know. Look, if I can be brought to the point in my career, in my life now at age 53, I think I am now, 53, where I can say, oh my gosh, that code looks pretty interesting. Like AI just created some app for me and I watched it code and I'm like, I wonder if I can figure out a little bit more about what the little intricacies of this particular part of it is. And now you start to pull on that thread and it's like, before you know it, you're thinking, my gosh, maybe I'll learn a little bit of code, which may or may not be.
Then you and I have curiosity.
Yeah.
And I think unfortunately, that's not something you can teach.
Yeah.
That's you either have that bug or in some way, and some have it more than others, or you don't.
Yeah.
And if you don't, I don't know what to tell those people because it's not their fault.
True.
It's just the way they're wired. And look at some people, I'm sure it's their fault, but I suspect that for people who aren't really curious or don't want to push the edge,
but I would think that for the comms profession specifically, if you're not a curious person, you're in the wrong job.
I think in the agency world that I've seen it,
yeah.
Everyone's curious in some shape or form.
Yeah.
So it's made that way. I haven't worked in house in many years, but I would imagine it's similar.
Fundamentals of everything is asking questions. Like, how can you?
Yeah. And journalists are the same way. And so, and
two
social media creators, I think, are similar too. So I think it's disrupting yourself before somebody else does.
Yeah. Yeah. That's just, I think you have to be disruptive. You have to look out there. Mark Schaefer's new book, Audacious, talks about that. Just being, going out there and, you got to do something to disrupt and figure out where you can do that disruption.
And there's safe ways to do that.
And there are.
So in my case, it was, I was doing this with AI tools before they were like enterprise tools with an Edelman. But the reason I was able to do that is I was taking no client information and putting it into LLMs. I was putting basically information that was already in the public domain.
Yeah.
Headlines. Into AI tools. So it was nothing but, there was a very safe lane for me to do that. And then when we got enterprise tools, that's what I used. But, so my point is I found a way to, and there are other tricks.
There's always a way.
There are other tricks to do that if you're, even in regulated industries.
There's always a way. And, now, especially with the tools that we have, anybody who's enterprising enough can find plenty of public information and create valuable content on behalf of even the most regulated company using only public information.
Right. And so it's how do you take that and
exactly.
you build off that with your own creativity, with your own expertise, with your knowledge. They're not going to have knowledge. The AI tools are not going to have knowledge of the client, for example, if you're in an agency, the way you do, or internally, your internal stakeholders and the psychology and what drives them. The AI tools are not going to know that. I mean, maybe internally focused AI tools that are trained on corporate data might, but other than that, and they're analyzing a CEO's writing style, and okay, then it knows. But
even then,
you know that, and so it's how you use that as a superpower to take what you do best from a 4 or 5 or 6 to a 7 or 8. No one's going to get to a 10.
Exactly.
Even the AI tools.
Well, I mean, I just did this demo the other day for a potential client, and financial institution, and I just dreamt up a scenario that might happen in a comms team, which is, okay, CEO's been invited to speak, has to come up with a 30-minute speech on this particular topic that's related to their industry. So starting with that, it took me, 20 minutes tops. I don't know. But because I'm so fluent in prompting for certain things, because I've been doing it now for a couple of years, and I have my own things, and I have tools that even help me prompt better. With some very, very good and extensive prompts and just a few publicly available resources, I crafted a 30-minute speech. Claude crafted a 30-minute speech for this CEO that was beautiful. I mean, beautiful. If I had worked inside the company, I would know how beautiful it was. But even as an outsider, as a communications expert, so to speak, I looked at this and I'm like, this is at least 75, 80% there, right?
But here's the tricky part though, right? Yeah. If you're going to charge for that, in the past, and this was new business, it sounds like, but in the past, if you're charging for that, in the past, you were charging hourly on the hour.
Yeah.
Say again?
Yeah, you would charge hourly. You can't do that.
Hourly.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
No.
You're going to have to, now that's where there's going to be a huge pain.
That's right.
Because everyone's going to try to charge on the value.
Mm-hmm. But
some of these things are very difficult to quantify the value of.
Yeah.
And that's why we went to hourly. So if it took you
20 minutes,
3 hours to do, whereas in the past it would take you 10 hours to do that.
Exactly. I'm cutting myself short.
Well,
or thinking
as an individual consultant, but now multiply that in an agency with 4,000 people.
And I completely get it. So that's why we have to think in terms of what that final product that you present before the client, right? Even if you're using AI or not, the level of quality and of that ultimate deliverable has not changed. In fact, I think it's even gotten harder now. So we as professionals in our field, and if you're a little more seasoned, you might have advantages in this, but there are people who've been around for 20, 30 years and can't write a sentence. I mean, it's like, it's true, but you have to know where your strengths are. And, I think that that's always going to be an advantage, moving forward. But, it's just an exciting time.
It can be a very exciting time.
Yeah. Well, look, maybe for our listeners who did not see this, the technology had its way with us for a second and just shut us down. Maybe that's a sign, because we have been talking for an hour and 15 minutes or so, that we should be kind of winding it down. So let's do that, Steve. I'm telling you, I could just keep talking with you forever. But
same.
Any last words, final words of wisdom for the listeners out there? And I know we've already covered quite a bit, and I think that they're going to walk away with so much. But anything you want to leave them with before we hit the end?
I would just say that I'm just very bullish about the communications industry and its prospects going forward, especially given what I talked about at the top about this tremendous societal, geopolitical and environmental changes that are in front of us right now, and the need for good, solid counsel all around to advise how to navigate all that, how to navigate not only the changing media landscape, but also new channels and new creators that are out there, some of whom are very highly politicized. Some, the whole notion of that smaller audiences now that are loyal might be more important to us than audiences that have scale or some combination thereof that we have to figure out the right mix. The need for measurement and insights and data-driven thinking is critical, and a lot of schools of thought around that. And so I just think it's the need for clarity for people to come in and have a clear voice and a clear gumption on what to do and be ready to adapt and to use AI the right way to further that has never been greater. And so I think the communication, look, there'll be disruption. We talked about billable hours and all kinds of stuff like that on the agency side. On the corporation side, there's always disruption. The comms teams are always being disrupted. And so but I think this has never been a better time. And despite all that, the need for people to come in and be absolutely strong counselors. And if we get this right, we can take our work from a 4 or 5 to 6 to 7 or 8.
You hear that, everybody? We are in a good position, especially I think those of us who are already working with AI and have already sort of drunk the Kool-Aid. But there's also this, I think, foundational part of communications, or people who are drawn to communications, where we are curious people, we hope, where we are conversationalists, we would hope, and where we know how to ask questions and we think critically. These are all very important things when you are iterating with AI.
Just one is that even though this can be unlike anything else I've seen, it can be a net destroyer.
Mm-hmm.
It can also be a net creator. So I think you have to so don't be afraid if it's destroying aspects of your work.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing you can do about that other than figuring out how to also turn it and mirror it into a net plus for you.
Yeah.
That might mean your job is different in 3 months than it is today.
Yeah.
But you stay ahead of that and you make that happen. Don't let that happen to you. Because if it happens to you, it's too late.
Yeah. And at this point, you might be asking yourself out there, listener, like, well, how do I know how my job's going to change? And how do I know what's going to go away? You know that by listening to people like Steve Rubel. That's how you know.
Right. I think you try to think ahead. You ask somebody. Or you look at other industries.
Yeah, true.
Look at, your professional services. Mm-hmm. Look at the accounting firms. Look at study other industries.
Yeah.
But also use AI to study other industries.
Right. It's like you can always be going back to AI or going to AI to understand more about AI. It's very meta.
Hey, my job are the following things. Here's what I do in a day. How might this be disrupted by AI? It'll tell you.
Mm-hmm.
How do I stay ahead of that? It'll tell you. And that might not be exactly what you do, but it's a launching off point for you to build on top of that, knowing your organization, knowing what you do, knowing your KPIs, et cetera.
And that is the kind of lateral thinking that I think we all have to figure out to work into our daily routines. I think it's a great idea. So Steve, this has been amazing. If anybody wants to find Steve Rubel, find him on LinkedIn. His
LinkedIn,
his name.
LinkedIn, I'm writing it not as much as I would like. I'm right because I've been talking to a lot of people. I've also been actively exploring my next opportunity, and so that's taken a lot of my time in a good way.
Yep.
And so but I'm gonna. If I learned one thing, I really learned during with the layoff and the period since, is just how powerful that platform is.
Absolutely,
I took it for granted. And so I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah. And I'm going nowhere fast too. So that's great. That's a great thing. Come back to the Trending Communicator again, please, Steve. I would love you to be back on, and we're gonna track your career. And when there's an update, we'll help you share it. Meantime, again, Steve Rubel on LinkedIn. As Steve said earlier, he's not on the other socials much, but just go on LinkedIn. You'll find him.
I might have accounts in other places. But that's my home.
That's where it is. All right. Thanks everybody. And thanks, Steve. Thanks for coming on.
Dan, thank you.
You got it, man.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thanks for taking the time to listen in on today's conversation. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to subscribe through the podcast player of your choice, share with your friends and colleagues, and leave me a review. 5 stars would be preferred, but it's up to you. Do you have ideas for future guests or you want to be on the show? Let me know at dan@trendingcommunicator.com. Thanks again for listening to The Trending Communicator.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Hennika Watkins-Porter hosts the Entrepreneurial You, empowering entrepreneurs with insights on leadership, business, and success. Hennika, tell listeners what to expect from your show.
So we provide innovative business strategies and practical solutions to common entrepreneurial challenges.
And where can people subscribe?
Find us at hennikawatkisporter.com, as well as the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcasts.net, or search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.